So, today I'm going to offer some thoughts on the first aphorism of the gay science, the teachers of the purpose of existence. Since I've started to post some Nietzschean aphorisms, the results have been relatively negative, but very enthusiastic. Almost as if I were posting internet rage bait, which gets people riled up and they really want to see it to dislike it. And in all honesty, Nietzschean philosophy could be viewed that way. He describes himself not as a philosopher, but dynamite. He says he wants to reevaluate all values. He's someone who wants to philosophize with a hammer. He's in there to break things, and his style very much matches that, of being provocative, of being offensive, confrontational. So, if you're reading this, if you're hearing Nietzschean aphorisms for the first time, if you're reading them for the first time, you're going to read a lot of things which will piss you off. And to be honest, they should, and they are intended to some degree. And if you don't understand the greater context, it becomes very hard to treat it like a coherent philosophical work. This is in part by design. One of the opening poems in The Gay Science has the lines in it, "Lured by my style and tendency, you follow and come after me. Follow your own self faithfully, take time, and thus you follow me." This is Nietzsche's sort of approach to how he wants people to read him. He doesn't want you to read a philosophical monograph which gets you from A to B to C to D, and then to a conclusion point, where the people reading it will draw the same logically pursued conclusion. He wants you to piece it together, more like you're reading a collection of poems. He wants you to consider it almost as a piece of art, as much as a work of philosophy, if not more so. And in doing so, he wants you to construct yourself by constructing your own reading. He does not want to spoon-feed you something. He wants you to read something. He wants you to be enticed by it. He wants you to be perhaps enraged by it. And he wants you to come through it having interpreted his work in a very personal way. What this means is when you start reading Nietzsche, you might find certain things interesting, but without a broader context, you're not going to get the big picture, whereas most philosophy delivers the big picture quite explicitly. Nietzsche's very coy about it. So, the end result of this is that when you start reading The Gay Science and you read about the teachers of the purpose of existence, you don't know many of the underlying things which he's talking about. So the next few minutes, I might try and help a little bit with that. So, the teachers of the purpose of existence. Who are these teachers? Well, he's talking about a whole class of people that have existed throughout history. Not one type of teacher of existence, of the purpose of existence, but all types. Anyone who teaches a purpose of existence is what he's talking about. So it's not just one religion or one metaphysics or one value structure, one type of ethics, whatever. He's talking about all of them. And what he's really trying to attack here is a commonality between them. Something which they all do in some way or another, which he is at odds with, which he has a problem with. So, what he is really attacking here is a sort of separation in a big sort of metaphysical or ontological separation between what he will elsewhere refer to as the real world and the apparent world. Now, this takes a little bit to wrap your head around, because when you think of the real world, you think, well, it's the world. It's the world as it is. It is the world I inhabit or something. But what he is talking about is something like Platonic forms, which says of the world we inhabit that the world we inhabit is false in some way. It's changing. It's constantly in a state of flux, so you can never dependably identify it. You can never pin it down. So what Plato does, and a lot of old Grecian metaphysics, and metaphysics to follow, is it says there is a world in front of us that is apparent in front of us, and that world is false. There is a greater truth lying underneath it. This is something like Platonic forms, or a god, or even, Nietzsche will go so far as to say logic or metaphysics. All of these are something which he will refer to in other places as transcendental otherworlds. These are idea structures which someone will place, as he says, below, above, or behind the world that we live in. So when you look at the world around you, you don't judge it as this apparent phenomena which you interpret here. And phenomenologists will be clicking on here and saying, but you don't judge it strictly as phenomena. You judge it in terms of a metaphysics or some sort of intellectual structure which lies underneath it, even something like an afterlife or other world. So when Nietzsche talks about the purpose of existence, what he's actually talking about is this divide between the apparent world and the quote-unquote real world, and that anyone who teaches the purpose of existence, this transcendental other world of this real world, quote, lying underneath it, they're teaching a purpose which is at odds with the world we actually inhabit. So, that's sort of the underlying thing going on with the teachers of the purpose of existence. It's not just any one type of teacher, it's all types of teachers. Now, this is a constantly reoccurring thing in Nietzsche. You'll see this reframed many, many ways, and this is one of the ways in which you will pull philosophical strands together out of a Nietzschean aphoristic work. You'll see things repeated in all sorts of different ways and then expanded upon and further thought being put into it. So when you see something constantly revisited and reframed, and once you realize that Plato's world of forms or religion is a transcendental otherworld, then you start to put all these things together. And then you can look at a section like this talking about the purpose of existence, and you're looking at a lot of the intellectual history of humankind. And all of a sudden Nietzsche's net is cast very, very wide. So going beyond this, another thing which comes up here is eternal laughter. That's something which he references in this first section, the notion of eternal laughter as opposed to a world of tragedy. So a comic world as opposed to a tragic world. But eternal laughter in opposition to seriousness. This seems rather broad and a little glib, but this is actually sort of a core divide in Nietzschean philosophy. So if, on the one hand, we've got these transcendental otherworlds, in this section, when Nietzsche's talking about them, in this first aphorism in The Gay Science, he's talking about them and saying that the teachers of the perfect purpose of existence have created a world in which there is something which is sacred, something which we are not allowed to laugh at, something which is above and beyond reproach. They're so fundamental that we treat them as cornerstones. They're sacred. They're something which you cannot mock because they are fundamental. So this is one of the features of the transcendental otherworld. It is something which is, well, again, to repeat myself, which is immune to laughter. And when we look at the title of this book, it is The Gay Science, otherwise translated as The Joyful Wisdom. It is the wisdom which includes laughter, which includes some sort of mischievousness, which allows for nothing to be sacred. Now, this is something which is central to Nietzschean philosophy, and he brings all sorts of binaries into his work, which sort of match this divide between the sacred, the purpose of existence, or something which cannot be It cannot be interpreted away, which is fundamental. And he does this in ways like the Apollonian versus a Dionysian, Apollo versus Dionysus. So on the one hand, you've got the god of reason and light and illumination. And on the other hand, you've got the god of drunkenness and revelry. And Nietzsche will put these two at odds with each other, and he will tie Apollo to reasonable structures and the teaching of the purpose of existence. Dionysus, on the other hand, is the god who comes in and has a party and wrecks things. He messes around, and this is tied for Nietzsche to the apparent world. It's a world which is, as Plato originally notes, constantly changing, constantly in flux. It's the thing which you can't ever quite pin down. Now, this also appears in things like a purely material world versus an ideal world. An ideal world is a place in which you smuggle this seriousness, this thing which cannot be laughed at in. And then the ideal world, Plato's forms, a religious framework, becomes more real than the world we actually inhabit. In a section in one of Nietzsche's later works, he's going to talk about the history of an error, and it is this teaching of the purpose of existence. It is this smuggling of the more real thing, quotes around real, behind the world, instead of in the world we actually inhabit. And for Nietzsche, this smuggling of something more real behind the world which we inhabit is a very anti-life move, because as we move through the world, we're actually interacting with it. It's the world which feeds us. It's the world where we love. It's the world where we do things. It's the world where we feel. But if you look at that world and then say, actually, there is a greater truth. There is a more real world behind this, above it, below it. Whether it's a world of forms, whether it's a god, whether it's a structure like mathematics or logic, you're in some way taking this novelty, this flux, and you are making it Apollonian. You are turning it into a crystal structure which you can always reference and in fixed terms. So, Nietzsche's gay science works along pursuit of the gay science, and this works along this axis of eternal laughter versus a tragic world, one which is pinned down into these Apollonian terms. Now, when we think about this, one other reference, the spirit of gravity in Thus Spake Zarathustra from the Vision and the Riddle. That's a very interesting section on this, just the confrontation with the spirit of this gravity, that which makes heavy, that which does not allow laughter. Don't read Thus Spake Zarathustra first, but it is one of his best works. Okay, anyways, just to finish up on this first section here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, I'm not going to explore the notion of preserving the species now. That's an interesting one, and what superficially this section is about. But I really think this section is more importantly diving into this divide, this Apollonian versus Dionysian, this the purpose of existence versus the comic and the tragic sort of divide in Nietzschean philosophy. But anyways, I'm not going to dive into the purpose or the preservation of the species stuff much here. I will include a couple of sections in the description if you're interested from The Will to Power and Thus Spake Zarathustra, which can dive into that a little bit if you'd like. But anyways, I'd like you to consider that he does finish off this section talking about my brothers, and there will be a place for us too, or a time for us too. As you're going forward in the gay science, consider who is speaking in this section, who Nietzsche's voice, who is the narrator of the gay science. And as you go forward, look for the figures in the gay science who might be these brothers, and consider what they're doing. And for a hint, they're the Argonauts of the ideal is probably one of the best examples there. So anyways, those are thoughts on the first section of the gay science and a little bit on how to read Friedrich Nietzsche. Have a good day.